Hello everybody, and welcome to Game Talk. We're going to be continuing our series on Mega Man X. Now, many people might be asking, am I going to keep on going with every single Mega Man? Well, possibly not, because there wasn't a whole lot of innovations between the latter part of the series. And I don't want to cover old material. So, without further ado, let's go to Mega Man X2. Mega Man X2 took place 1 year, the plot takes place 6 months after the first events of the first one. It took about a year to make. Now, pretty much everybody that I already mentioned was working on this game. But we'll talk more about that later. Let's talk about the various release dates. It was released on December 16th, 1994 in Japan for the SNES. North American release was January 3rd, 1995, and the PAL format, or the European versions, was released on October 18th, 1995. Now, iMode, which is on the PC, was only released in Japan on December 1st, 2008, and on Easy Web, again only in Japan, was released on May 13th, 2009. Now, there's a lot of similarities between X and X2 for obvious reasons, such as, the power-ups, the layout of the game is graphically similar, but this one does have a bit of an innovation. Capcom included the CX4 in-cartridge enhancement chip, which allowed for some 3D wireframe effects. The development team was instructed to utilize this technology as much as possible when working on the game. Now, the game got mostly positive reception, although many reviewers dismissed it due to the lack of changes from the original Mega Man X. Mega Man X2 was also included in the Mega Man X Collection, which was released on the Nintendo GameCube and PlayStation 2 in North America in 2006. It's also available on the Wii and Wii U Virtual Console setup. Now, let's get on to the plot. Mega Man X2 is set in the year during the 22nd century, which is known as 21XX. In this world, as previously discussed, humans and Reploids, which are the mechanical beings, they both populate the planet. Most Reploids do not want to hurt humans. However, some do branch out due to the fact that they have human-level intelligence and free will. Again, I don't know why someone would program a robot to have human-level intellect and free will and expect it to do whatever you want it to do. That just doesn't happen. But the ones that decided to go for destructive criminal activity were called Mavericks. And during the events of the first one, unfortunately, Zero sacrificed himself at the latter part where X was able to defeat Sigma. Well, 6 months later, X has assumed the head of the Maverick Hunters. He tracks a manufactured Maverick bearing Sigma's emblem to a Reploid factory where he launches a full-scale assault. However, despite Sigma's apparent death and X's recent efforts, a Maverick rebellion continues. 3 powerful Mavericks, Surges, Agile, and Violin, form a group called X Hunters. They gained control of the North Pole. They gained control in the North Pole somewhere in between the time of Sigma's death and the trio's sudden uprising. Surges has collected the deceased Zero's body parts. This particular part is actually very important to remember for later on in the game. After you beat the factory mission, you're assigned to seek and exterminate 8 Maverick leaders on a large continent directly south of the North Pole. The X Hunters are able to contact the Maverick Hunter shortly thereafter and taunt him with pieces of Zero's body, telling them if you could defeat one of us, we will give you a piece of Zero. Again, this part is important to remember. Even gameplay, it's important to remember. This is where the story deviates. You have a choice to either go there and collect Zero's body parts before heading to the X-Hunter fortification in the North Pole. If you gather up all the parts, Dr. Kane will attempt to reactivate Zero using his original control chip. If you do not do this, the X-Hunters have attacked Maverick Hunter headquarters and steal any collected body parts you may have, as well as the control chip itself. And you play as X, going through all the stages. The particular X-Hunters are in some of those stages. There's a certain order in which you have to go in if you want to collect the Zero body parts. If you don't want to collect the body parts, well, you just made the game a little bit more difficult for yourself. But at the end of all of this, Sigma reveals himself to be behind the entire plot. The entire thing where Sigma has come back. If you did not collect Zero's body parts throughout the stage, you must face Zero in combat. This can be a huge pain, but it's avoidable. By collecting all of his body parts, you get a gray armored clone of Zero, but the real Zero appears right there and destroys that clone for you. Either way, after that event, Sigma will be retreating, Zero creating a passageway into the floor which allows X to pursue. After you defeat the villain, you rendezvous with Zero outside and watch as the facility self-destructs. Sounds pretty similar to the first set of games. A lot of common sense with that. Now, let's talk about the development of the game, because there is a little bit more. It is a little different from the first Mega Man X. Now, for those of you that were not aware that I have made a part 1 of this video, you might want to watch that first. The Mega Man X2 team was developed at Capcom, which included artist and designer Keiji Inafune, Sho Tsugi, and Yoshiada Tsuda. The majority of the people that worked on X2 had either been heavily involved in the development of the first Mega Man X, or were actually completely new to the franchise. Inafune created a large part in designing the Reploids. He was actually hands-off with the art design this time for X2. He decided to focus more on directing and producing the story, writing for the newer series beginning with this title. According to Tsuda, it was Unafune's decision to bring Zero back to life in Mega Man X2, simply because he thought it would be a shame to keep him dead. And he felt particularly attached to Zero. The reason why is because Zero was actually slated to be the main protagonist in the X series. Even though Inafune had relinquished most of his character design duties in X2, he absolutely refused to allow any drastic changes to the illustration of Zero. To me, good job. Now, as for the game's antagonist, the X-Hunters, there were several illustrations within Inafune's sketchbook prior to the completion of the first Mega Man X. Their aesthetic features were combined to create the basis for Sigma's design in Mega Man X. The 3 designs that were fleshed out as separate characters for the sequel. Originally, the team had planned to include a 4th character, a female X-Hunter, and they were going to call them the 4 Guardians. However, both this character as well as Violen's second form were cut from the final version of the game due to lack of resources. In creating the 8 Maverick bosses, the development team considered holding public fan submissions, as they'd done with previous several games in the original Mega Man series, and ultimately decided against that idea to establish a contrast between the two series. As Tsugi elaborated, with Mega Man, we wanted players to feel a certain familiarity with the characters, but it was our intention of the X series would have a world with more hardcore feel to it. We didn't want bosses in the world to be cute products of kids' imaginations. We wanted them to be solid characters refined by professionals. Now let's talk about that CX4 enhancement chip, a digital signal processor which allows for limited 3D graphical effects such as rotation, enlarging, and shrinking of wireframe objects. The company held weekly meetings devoted to utilizing the chip to its maximum potential in Mega Man X2. Tsugi commented that the CX4 chip was their greatest adversary to date when they were instructed to use it in as many ways as possible. Now let's talk about the musical score. The musical score for Mega Man X2 was chiefly composed by Yuki Araya. Others such as Ippo Yamada were involved in some of the game's sound production, and Tsugi wanted a flame stage theme cut from the game, but the song was kept due to the popularity amongst the development staff. Additionally, the game's ending theme was originally its final boss track. As the team felt it was more appropriate for the ending music, it was slightly altered and made as such. Now, many people may not know this, but the Mega Man X2 soundtrack featuring the original SNES instrumentals were included as part of the Capcom Music Generation Rockman X1-X6 compilation released by, I cannot pronounce this company's name, so I'll just spell it out. SULEPUTER in 2003. Well, that's all for X2. I'm not sure if I'm going to be going into any of the X3 or X4, but we'll just have to figure that out later. I'll see you later. Bye-bye.